Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Really glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have a mixed martini, a bad martini, and a crazy martini, which hopefully one day soon we'll have a good ending to it. But we have a Doris update and a Diane update. And if you haven't been with us in recent weeks, we're glad you're with us now. But also, Doris is who the Kamala Harris campaign and the DNC think I am, apparently, because they keep sending emails, fundraising emails aimed at some woman named Doris to me, and they keep sending things for someone named Diane to Jim. So let's check in with where we are on some of these things. First of all, this is October 24th, so late last week. They send in an email that says, Doris's donation history. And as you all know, Doris has not given anything to the Kamala Harris campaign this year, and they're not very happy about that. Then for a couple of emails, they ask Doris to give so she can get on the list for one lucky grassroots donor that will actually get a call from Kamala Harris. And so you know how tempting that was for me. So no, nothing's happening there. Then the very next day, Friday, they send me one that says, Doris's record. With only 10 days until Election Day, is this record of your support for Vice President Harris and Governor Walz correct? Meaning nothing? Yes, it is, Kamala Harris campaign. Sunday, they start with an email that says, this is early in the morning, a simple request. They wanted $47 because she would be the 47th president. The very same day after getting the email that said a simple request, they send out another one that says a big ask that we don't make lightly. So that tells you how things are going. They wanted $100.
I think they make that lightly. I don't think you don't seem that hesitant.
And then most recently, this is yesterday. Doris, can Vice President Harris count on your very first donation today to defeat Trump? He's gaining ground in key polls, and we are short of a crucial fundraising goal to reach undecided voters. That's all on the subject line, mind you. And so they're talking about how they're running out of time and resources when they had $1 billion. That's not very good resource management. And so, Doris, thank you for all your support, which is none. But can Kamala count on your very first donation today to defeat Trump? Our country's future hangs in the balance. So basically, Jim, if she doesn't win, it's all Doris's fault.
Screw you, Doris. You let us down. I just want to point out, but people think my emails are long. All right, I can put the entire morning jolt shorter than what they put in that subject line. I am sorry. I too am getting what sounds like, I don't know whether it's desperation. I don't know if it's anger. I don't know if it's fear. Something is making the DGA, Democratic Governors Association, is the one that's got this texting list. They're starting to address Diane, which, by the way, I really should walk around with a dictaphone talking to Diane all the time and just see how many people pick up on the reference. They're starting to talk to Diane like Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction. Diane, is there anything we can say to get you to confirm your 24? But they're saying they don't need donations. They just say I need to confirm my vote. We need to hear from our top supporters. Confirm now. Are you voting for Kamala Harris or not? Yes, no, unsure. DGA, stop to end. And I just, there are various times I will offer a brusque response, sometimes a rude response. I block them almost always. And they keep finding new ways to put this on the list. But this time I felt different. And I just thought, what would Diane do? And I really feel like Diane is struggling with this choice. I just feel like Diane. And so I just wrote back, I just don't know yet. And I was just kind of curious. I was like, part of me is like, how much can I get these people to devote resources, desperately trying to persuade Diane, not knowing that Diane's never going to vote the way they want. And ironically, not a response yet, Greg. This was sent Monday. What time was it sent? 2:55 p.m. It's been, we're now close to 24 hours, no response. So yeah. I think these horrible texting maniacs really are kind of slipping on it because Diane is out there ready to be persuaded and you drop the ball. I really think it's, is America at stake? You're not acting like it, so that's on you, exactly. Dumb texter.
I love the different psychological tactics that they use. One, it's, hey, if you do this, you could get one-on-one time with the candidate. Or it's the country, like you said, the country guilt. Is hanging in the balance, and it's your fear. Donation that's going to make the difference here. Why is your donor support at 0 this year, Doris?
Yeah,
Doris. Neither's working, so I wonder what they'll do next.
Diane, we have a donor who will contribute $8 billion if you donate $1. That's a matching. That's an $8 billion to 1 match. Will you please kick in? Yeah, so, who are these donors who are like, sure, I want to support your cause, but only if you can raise money from other people. Otherwise, I'm giving you nothing.
So much fun. So much fun. But keep them coming. Yeah, I never want to tell them I'm not voting for them because I want to keep them coming. This has been the best entertainment so far this election season. So anyway, on to our mixed first martini here. And this is focusing on the state of Nevada. And this is one of the battleground states, but every year since 2004, Republicans have managed not to win it. They did win the governorship there in 2022 with Joe Lombardo, but that's about it in terms of statewide races since Dean Heller won the Senate race there in 2012. But as you point out in the Morning Jolt today, Jim, Republicans, and not only in Nevada, but certainly in Nevada, are embracing the idea of early voting. There had been this issue for a couple of cycles now where the Democrats do the early voting thing and the mail-in voting thing, and then Republicans swamp the ballot box on Election Day and hope that it overtakes what the Democrats did. Well, that wasn't working in a lot of different places, and so whether it was Glenn Youngkin last year in Virginia or Republican leaders all over the place this year saying, no, we need to do early voting. You don't know if you're not going to be able to make it on Election Day if something pops up. We've got to bank all the votes we can. If this is going to be the law, we need to take advantage of it as best as we can. So as you point out in the Jolt today, due to the research of John Ralston and others, and Ralston despises Trump, but he knows his data and he knows his Nevada politics pretty well, pointing out, as you say it, that over half of Nevada's registered voters have already voted, which is an amazing percentage so far. And so far, registered Republicans have shown up in bigger numbers than registered Democrats by a margin of roughly 40,000. You don't always know that they're going to vote for the nominee that they're registered with in their party, but pretty much that's always the case. He writes, the Republican turnout edge is now almost 8%, almost 9% in Clark County. That's where Vegas is. The usually reliable Clark Dem firewall has all but evaporated. The rural GOP firewall is at 37,000. And Washoe, I think that's where Reno is also going well for the Republicans, plus 5,800. So he says this is different than previous election cycles. Don't assume it's going to work out the same way. And that means, as you've pointed out, Jim, that the turnout operation is improving. There had been some concerns about that, but it seems to be working well in Nevada at this point. We'll see what then materializes on Election Day, but Republicans seem to be, at this point, in a much better position than they have been in most recent cycles.
Yeah. Now, one thing about that, and I correct anything John Ralston writes with great trepidation and sense that this is going to blow up in my face. But when he says half of registered voters in the state, I think he means half the turnout from the 2020 cycle is what they're at. I went and I looked it up in the state. They have 1.9 million registered voters. So, but you don't know what the final turnout's going to be. So, but even then, if it's not half, it's close to half. It's a really high amount of early votes so far. Ralston updates it at least once a day, sometimes even twice a day. So but you can just see in the tone, this is just totally different from anything we've seen from the Republican early vote so far. And again, absolutely true caveat. The fact that someone's a registered Republican is not a guarantee that they're voting for Donald Trump or any other particular Republican. The fact that they're registered Democrat. But again, most likely, you're registered Republican, you're voting for Trump. Registered Democrat, you're voting for Harris. Now you look at that and you're like, wow. Now the problem is you and I wrote about this in today's Morning Jolt, our catchphrase, way to go, Nevada, way to go, goes all the way back to Sharon Angle against Harry Reid. Harry Reid, probably one of the most despicably unethical members to ever walk through the Senate chamber. That we've seen the Harry Reid machine, which is what they call it out there. It's a combination of labor unions and a lot of Latino voters out there. And they bring it out the vote for Democrats, and they manage to put Democrats over the top seemingly almost every single time. Last year's governor's race, a notable exception. So, it's hard if you're a Republican. It feels like Lucy in the football. You feel like you've been here before. On the other hand, if the Harry Reid machine is going to save Democrats this time, where is it? What, did they decide to take the first few weeks off? Or they, and we should also point out, this was the good part of the martini. We should point out the Americans for Prosperity Action. I know they're totally different from Americans Prosperity. One's the non-endorsing kind, and one's the one that can get involved in campaigns. Anyway, they are active in Nevada as well as in pretty much every other state that's got a competitive Senate race and a whole bunch of places where they're competitive House races. AFP Action has not endorsed Trump. But when you bring out the vote for McCormick in Pennsylvania, when you bring out the vote for Hovde in Wisconsin, you bring out the vote for every Senate Republican candidate, I think that's going to help Trump's numbers. And this may be doing some good in all of these places. And Brown is competing in what looked like a not terribly competitive race in the Senate out in Nevada. So you look at that. If you're looking for reasons for Republican optimism, those numbers should make you feel pretty good today.
But as we said, it's a mixed martini, and that's because of a ruling that came down on Monday from the Nevada Supreme Court. This is the USA Today story on that. The court ruled Monday that the state can count mailed ballots that arrive without a postmark up to 3 days after Election Day on November 5th. The RNC and former President Donald Trump's campaign committee had sought to block the counting of ballots without postmarks in the swing state, and the party has fought in other states to prevent counting ballots that arrive after Election Day. And so, Jim, I've always been of the opinion that they should probably be even postmarked the day before, just to confirm and give people even greater confidence that everything's on the up and up. And let's be honest, you've had at least 2 months in every state since your last primary, and most states even more than that, to get your vote taken care of. But not needing a postmark at all, again, will reduce confidence in the election and the Reid machine. I don't know if they could take advantage of that in any particular way, but I'm sure they would try. And the court's rationale on this was weird. It's like the law doesn't say anything about no postmarks. It just says we have to accept smudged, illegible postmarks. So therefore, we're going to let no postmarks go. Again, if you want to have confidence in your election, in how it's carried out and how the results come in, you can't be doing stupid stuff like that.
Listeners, you knew there was no way we're getting through this segment without a genuine way to go, Nevada. Way to go. But there you are. Thank you, court system. Because this was out of all the objections that Trump made to the 2020 election results, overwhelming majority of them did not check out, were crazy conspiracy theories and were nonsense. But the one glaring exception was that this was effectively the rule that was in place in Pennsylvania. Now, the number of absentee ballots that they accepted after the election, or after postmarked after Election Day, whether they're smudged postmark or no postmark, was smaller than Biden's margin in the state. So it would, even if every one of those votes was for Biden, even if every one of those votes was fraudulent, it would not have changed the outcome. But that said, no, if you want your ballot to count, you should have it turned in before Election Day. I guess I could see the argument if it was postmarked on Election Day because people are voting on Election Day. But after, like smudged, sorry, I don't trust you. You ever, and I realize that's on the U.S. Postal Service and not on you. If you don't have faith in Newman and Cliff Clavin, well, then maybe you should either vote it really considerably earlier or vote in person on Election Day. Or vote in person early, which is available in a whole bunch of states. It's not like it's hard to cast a ballot in all these circumstances. And the idea that, we're just going to assume if it arrives 3 days after Election Day that it's fine, No. And so this is something that Republican poll watchers have to watch with a hawk. We got to see exactly how many of those votes are. Could it be fraud? I don't first of all, the Republican numbers in Nevada are looking really good. And you're like, oh, wow, if it's that much higher, maybe we're outside the margin of fraud. But this is I don't understand this. I could even see the argument for smudged, because in that case, you are a good person. You got your ballot in there on time. And then the idiots at the Postal Service have a lousy machine that leaves a smudged postmark on it. And you can say the argument, that's not my fault, that's the Postal Office's fault. But afterwards, or no postmark? No, I'm sorry, that doesn't belong in there. I'm sure Republicans will challenge this. I don't think it's going to go very far. But again, that's what makes this a very mixed martini.
All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And this was flagged by Ben Shapiro this morning, and I'm sure other people have gotten this as well. He has a relatively long Twitter thread. It's like 8, 9, 10 posts in the thread. But it all stems from the fact that the New York Times seems to be collaborating with Media Matters for America. That's a Soros-backed venture. David Brock, remember that famous name from the mid-'90s when he was all anti-Clinton and then he became a hardcore lefty? Well, here's the email that Ben Shapiro got. Good day, Mr. Shapiro. I hope you're well. I'm Nico Grant, a reporter at the New York Times. I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment for an upcoming article that takes a look at how political commentators have discussed the upcoming election on YouTube. We rely on an analysis conducted by researchers at Media Matters for America. Could you kindly provide us with a comment or decline to comment by end of day tomorrow, Tuesday, October 29th, which is today, of course. Thanks so much for your time. Here are points we plan to include. Media Matters identified 286 YouTube videos between May and August that have contained election misinformation, including narratives that have been debunked or not supported with credible evidence. Researchers identified videos posted by you in these 4 months that contain election misinformation. We feature a clip of you saying, quote, your party rigged many of the voting rules in advance of the election in order to ensure an extraordinary number of mail-in ballots and ballot harvesting, unquote. And then they go on to ask some questions about his standing on YouTube, whether he's been demonetized and so forth at various times. And Shapiro says, what precisely is the New York Times doing? It's perfectly obvious, using research from Media Matters, a radical left-wing organization whose sole purpose is destroying conservative media in order to pressure YouTube to demonetize conservatives 1 week from the election. That's the entire game here. Run an article in America's most trusted newspaper that declares pretty much every major conservative a purveyor of misinformation on YouTube, thus strong-arming YouTube into taking action against conservatives. And he goes on and on. He says it's basically a way to stifle conservative speech. And I don't know who else has gotten this, but essentially Shapiro's saying that this is, the New York Times effort, along with Media Matters, to stifle and shut up conservatives, or at least rob them of their profits from their YouTube channel at a critical time in the cycle.
First of all, the single most disturbing part of this story is the fact that the New York Times is relying on Media Matters research and treating it as a credible, objective source. Does the New York Times, when a Democrat says Donald Trump wants to ban abortion, is that misinformation? Because that's not Trump's position. That's not what Trump wants to do. Wants to kick it back to the states. You touch him anywhere. Trump wants to ban IVF. We've heard that from a whole bunch of Democrats, including the Democratic ticket. Never mind. No. Trump actually wants to get taxpayer paying for IVF. He goes in the other direction in a bad way, I would argue. Liz Cheney wrote in a New York Times op-ed that there was a chance Donald Trump would seize voting machines, order the military to seize voting machines, and there would never be another presidential election, free and fair presidential election in U.S. history. Is that misinformation? Whoopi Goldberg on The View said earlier this week that Trump will separate interracial couples, and he will make sure that the white spouse ends up with another white spouse. Is that disinformation? Does anyone does that seems like something that, I'm sure you can find view clips on YouTube. Is that the sort of thing that should be demonetized? And finally, hey, remember the lab leak was crazy conspiracy theories too? One near and dear to my, like the idea that, I have noticed how often fact checking, Democrats will say this stuff, and rarely, if ever, does it seem to end up in one of the fact checking columns. But you notice that forwarded email from Aunt Edna, or that Facebook post that you kind of know, no, Joe Biden did not sell the state of Nebraska to the Chinese. Yes, there's a lot of crazy, goofy conspiracy theories out there that float around in the right-wing fringes. And if you want to spend some time and effort, dispelling them, fine. Most of them are pretty absurd and out there. Anybody who's believing them are people who wanted to believe in, is what I would say. But in this case, big-name people, from Democratic candidates to MSNBC hosts to Whoopi Goldberg, could say this stuff. And it never seems to concern the people who are so deeply concerned about misinformation or disinformation. So I'm hoping that the reaction of Ben Shapiro and these other folks will kind of make the New York Times look so ridiculous that they don't write this story. It'll be interesting to see what it does. I'd also point out that it's October 29th. If they're going to go this out there and say, every right-wing host on YouTube is, disseminating dangerous disinformation, clock's ticking. So I don't know, I don't know if this is genuinely the October surprise or it's just the New York Times saying, we hate conservatives and here's a way where we can try to, cost them money.
Now, if Ben Shapiro had gone through that whole thread, it would have taken about 5 times less in reading it than I did. But anyway, he's got a big audience and flagging that will potentially make a difference. And so you were telling me earlier. Yeah,
you always get your money's worth with Ben Shapiro. Most words per minute of any other host. Is the only host where people, I've heard some people listen to podcasts on 1.5 speed because they want to save time. That way you can skip through all of my uhs. But with Shapiro, you're required to play it at 1/2 speed just to understand it. That's, Bobby Jindal said that guy talks fast. Should be selling micro machines at Federal Express.
That is a
cut
great
back to the
Gen X
80s.
reference.
Yeah.
Yes, the FedEx guy. Man, he was awesome. All right, more election fun in our crazy martini now. We head out to the Pacific Northwest and news that there have been at least 3 different incendiary devices dropped in these ballot boxes, drop boxes, in Portland as well as in Vancouver, Washington. And according to the authorities out there, it looks like the evidence suggests this is all the work of the same person. And so they're still searching for whoever did this. But in the Vancouver situation, Vancouver, Washington, obviously, not Canada, it looks like hundreds of ballots were in there and potentially destroyed. In Portland, doesn't look like there was much damage at all. And so if you voted and you dropped your ballot in that drop box in Vancouver, Washington, a real question exists now as to whether or not your vote's going to matter this year. But Jim, I also feel like in addition to wanting to catch and prosecute these people to the very fullest extent of the law, regardless of which side they might be on, it's also another reminder that these drop boxes are stupid. Yes, they have cameras monitoring them, but it's hard to necessarily see in some of the camera what's happening there. There's enough different ways to cast your ballot: in person on Election Day, in person on early voting. Even the mail-in voting through the U.S. mail is preferable to what's going on here with these drop boxes placed in different places around the city. So while we shouldn't lose sight of what the actual story is here, it's also another reason why these things shouldn't be there in the first place.
So Facebook is very good for reminding you what you were doing on a certain day, a certain number of years ago. And apparently 10 years ago, 2014, God, that was a good year for Republicans. I was taking a trip to Portland, Oregon. This is before Portland burned down during the pandemic with the Antifa guys. But no, it was beautiful, fun city. The hipsters know how to eat. But they had gone to all vote by mail back then. And I remember walking through downtown with my wife and seeing the drop boxes and going, huh. And the thing I remember thinking at the time was it was bright, painted kind of this lemon yellow color. And I don't know if you've probably most of our listeners have seen in their neighborhood. Sometimes they have those kind of places where you can drop clothes for the homeless, or books, donation for books for libraries or something like that. And I kind of looked at the drop box and I was like, how many times do they get clothes or books in there? Because people think they're the other kind of box where you drop stuff in there. Yeah. But obviously, the more polarized our culture has gotten, the idea of casting a ballot early and then just leaving it in a box in the middle of a parking lot doesn't strike me as a good idea. Now, you want to vote early in a municipal building or county office or something like that? Fine. That makes absolute perfect sense. Those buildings have locks. Those buildings have alarms. I assume, But in this era with so many nut jobs, the idea that, first of all, and again, I thought it was silly when that Democratic congressman locked himself to his mailbox back in 2020 because the claim was that Trump was stealing mailboxes and he was going to, that's how he was going to steal the election. But you look at this and you're realizing the surprising thing is that it hasn't happened already, and that somebody didn't come to the idea of put some sort of incendiary device, or I suppose you could try to run it over with a truck or just do something to destroy the drop box and then hopefully destroy the ballots. By the way, apparently there was a report. I have not had a chance to verify this, so take this with as many grains of salt, but it was on Twitter. Apparently somebody just found a box of ballots in Dade County, Florida. Not great, Bob. That's middle of a road somewhere. So God knows how somebody had gotten it or something like. My assumption was, this being Dade County, Florida, somebody stole it just thinking it was valuable, and then finding out that it was just ballots. They just left it somewhere. That's my other thought about. Of course, my opinion is entirely shaped by Miami Vice reruns. Nonetheless, you kind of look at it, you're like, okay, so look, it's a free country. Americans, listeners to this podcast, vote however you want. In person early, I would find much preferable than leaving my ballot somewhere. And if you don't have that option, I would much rather turn in my ballot inside a building. Your county office or something like that. I actually wrote about this, and a listener said they did use a drop box outside a police station. I'd feel pretty good about that one. I feel like that's probably you don't see a lot of guys trying to, steal the donuts from the cop's office. So there's that. But I would not do that just because, look, you probably have fewer nut jobs in your community than Portland, but that's not a high bar to clear. And all it takes is one who decides to set off a firecracker in there or some other nonsense. Somebody mentioned the idea of if you put bleach in there, does that wash off what's written in there? I have no idea. But there are enough nut jobs who want mischief that I would not go ahead and do that. So vote early in person, or vote on person election day, or vote someplace where you know your ballot's going to be secure. Drop boxes are a bad idea, and you kind of wonder after this event whether they're going to get slowly phased out.
Exactly. One can hope. Yeah, it's a terrible idea. It invites way too much mischief. And I would say the same thing, unfortunately, about the public mailboxes. Walk it into a post office, hand it to your mail carrier as he delivers your mail that day, or, do what you need to do to make sure that your vote is handled properly. So, Jim, 1 week from today is election day. We won't know anything that day, but the next day we probably should. So anyway, have a great day. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Tuesday, and join us again on Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.